David's English podcast. Like, comment, share. Hello everyone, and welcome back to David's English podcast. I'm David, and I'm so happy to see you here today. If you're new to this channel, welcome. This is a podcast-style English learning channel where we help you improve your English in natural and interesting ways. We talk about different topics, share useful tips, and make learning English fun and easy. Today, we're doing something special. Today, we are going to learn English with stories. That's right. Instead of our usual podcast format, we're going to use a very interesting story summary to help you improve your English. We're going to talk about one of the most powerful civilizations in human history and how it came to an end. The story is called The Fall of the Roman Empire. Before we begin, if you enjoy learning English this way, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow, and you'll never miss a new episode. Now, this is a story about power, glory, mistakes, and collapse. It teaches us that even the mightiest empires can fall. It's a story that took place over hundreds of years, with fascinating characters, dramatic battles, and important lessons that still matter today. So get comfortable, relax, and let's begin our journey into history. The glory of Rome. Let me start by painting a picture for you. Imagine the year 100 AD. Rome is at its peak. The Roman Empire controls most of Europe, North Africa, and parts of the Middle East. It's the largest empire the Western world has ever seen. How big was it exactly? Well, the empire stretched from Britain in the north to Egypt in the south, from Spain in the west to Syria in the east. If you could walk in a straight line across the empire, it would take you months, maybe even a year. And everywhere you went, you would see Roman roads, Roman soldiers, and Roman buildings. The city of Rome itself is magnificent. Picture this: marble temples reaching toward the sky. The famous Colosseum, where 50,000 people watch gladiator fights. The Circus Maximus, where chariot races thrill the crowds. There are beautiful buildings, huge stadiums, public baths where people relax and socialize, and roads that connect the entire empire. Roman soldiers marched through the streets wearing their famous armor, metal helmet, a red tunic, and a short sword called a gladius. The emperor lives in a grand palace on Palatine Hill, surrounded by advisors, guards, and servants. Let me tell you about Roman engineering. It was absolutely incredible. Roman engineers build aqueducts, which are special bridges that carry water from the mountains to the cities. Some of these aqueducts are over 50 miles long. They bring fresh, clean water to Rome so that people can drink, bathe, and water their gardens. They also build roads so well that some of them still exist today. 2,000 years later, these roads are straight, well-drained, and strong. The Romans have a saying. Here's something ironic. Rome started hiring barbarians to serve in the Roman army. Roman citizens didn't want to be soldiers anymore. It was dangerous. The pay was bad, and they could make more money in other ways. So the army recruited barbarians. Some barbarian generals even commanded Roman legions. This created a strange situation. Rome was hiring barbarians to protect them from other barbarians. The Roman army was becoming less and less Roman, and these barbarian soldiers felt more loyalty to their tribe and their general than to Rome itself. Then, in the year 378 AD, something terrible happened. A large barbarian army, the Visigoths, met a Roman army at a place called Adrianople in modern-day Turkey. The two armies fought a massive battle, and the barbarians won. Not only did they win, but they completely destroyed the Roman army. 2/3 of the Roman soldiers were killed. Even worse, the Roman emperor himself, Valens, was killed in the battle. This had never happened before in centuries. The mighty Roman legions, who had conquered Gaul, Britain, Egypt, and Greece, were defeated by barbarians. The emperor, the most powerful man in the world, was dead on the battlefield. This was a turning point. The barbarians realized that Rome was weak. They realized that the Roman army could be beaten. They became bolder. They attacked more often and with larger forces. The Romans tried to make deals with the barbarians. They offered them land if they would settle peacefully and defend the empire. Some tribes agreed. The Visigoths were given land in the Balkans. The Franks were given land in Gaul. But this didn't solve the problem. It just put barbarian armies inside the empire. Then, in the year 410 AD, something shocking occurred, something that sent shockwaves throughout the entire Roman world. A barbarian king named Alaric led his Visigoth army all the way to Rome itself. They surrounded the city, cut off the food supply, and waited. The people of Rome were starving. Finally, the city gates were opened, some say by slaves, others say by traitors, and the Visigoths entered Rome. For 3 days, the Visigoths looted the city. They took gold, silver, jewels, and treasures. They ransacked houses, temples, and public buildings. They didn't destroy everything, but they took what they wanted. This was the first time in 800 years that Rome had been captured by a foreign enemy. 800 years. Think about that. The last time Rome fell was in 390 BC, when the Gauls attacked. Since then, Rome had been invincible, untouchable, the center of the world. People across the empire were horrified. How could this happen? Rome was supposed to be eternal. The Romans had a famous saying, Roma aeterna, Rome is eternal. Poets wrote about it. Emperors believed it. Citizens took pride in it. But now, that belief was shattered. If Rome could fall, what did that mean for the empire? What did it mean for civilization itself? There was also a problem with population. Diseases spread through the empire, killing millions of people. The Antonine Plague in 165 to 180 AD killed up to 10 million people. Later, the plague of Cyprian killed thousands more. With fewer people, there were fewer farmers, fewer soldiers, fewer workers. Cities that once had 100,000 people now had 50,000. Farms were abandoned. The economy shrank. By the way, if you're finding this story interesting and helpful for your English learning, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything, and it helps us create more content like this. The barbarian threat. Now, while Rome was dealing with these internal problems, bad leadership, economic collapse, corruption, Disease's serious external threat was growing. Barbarian tribes were gathering at the borders of the empire, looking for opportunities to attack. Let me explain who these barbarians were. The Romans called anyone who lived outside the empire and didn't speak Latin a barbarian. The word comes from barbar, which was the sound Romans thought foreign languages sounded like. To Roman ears, these people were just saying bar nonsense. This included many different groups. The Germanic tribes in the north like the Goths, Vandals, Franks, Alemanni, and Burgundians. There were also the Huns, fierce horsemen from Central Asia. Each tribe had its own language, customs, and leaders. Were these people really barbarians in the sense of being uncivilized savages? Not really. They had their own cultures, languages, and traditions. They were skilled metalworkers, farmers, and warriors. Some tribes had their own forms of government and law, but they weren't Roman, and that's what mattered to the Romans. These tribes wanted land. Why? Because their own lands were often cold, poor, and crowded. They looked south at the Roman Empire and saw fertile farmland, prosperous cities, and wealth. They saw warm weather, good soil, and opportunity. Can you blame them for wanting to move there? Some tribes wanted to invade violently. Others wanted to migrate peacefully and settle as Roman allies. But Rome didn't have a consistent policy. Sometimes they let tribes settle. Sometimes they fought them. Sometimes they hired them as mercenaries. This inconsistency created problems. At first, when Rome was strong, the Roman army was powerful enough to keep the barbarians out. The Romans built walls and forts along the borders. The most famous is Hadrian's Wall in Britain, which stretched 73 miles across the entire width of northern England. They stationed legions of soldiers at these borders to guard against invasions. But remember, Rome was having money problems. The government couldn't afford to pay soldiers well anymore. Military spending decreased. Training standards dropped. So the quality of the Roman army declined. Many soldiers were poorly trained. Their equipment was inferior. Discipline was weak. It's like changing the captain of a ship every few weeks. While the ship is sailing through a storm, eventually the ship will crash. This constant fighting meant that the government couldn't focus on real problems. Instead of building roads, improving cities, or defending the borders, the army was busy fighting itself. Resources were wasted. Good leaders were killed. Chaos spread. The second big problem was the economy. The empire needed enormous amounts of money to pay soldiers, build roads, maintain aqueducts, feed the cities, and provide entertainment for the people. But Rome was running out of money. Why? Because the empire had stopped growing. You see, Rome had become rich by conquering other lands and taking their gold, silver, resources, and slaves. When Rome conquered Gaul, that's modern-day France, they took huge amounts of gold. When they conquered Egypt, they controlled the grain supply that fed the whole empire. Conquest brought wealth. But now, Rome had reached its limits. To the north were fierce Germanic tribes in cold forests. To the east was the powerful Persian Empire. To the south was the Sahara Desert. There were no more easy lands to conquer. Without new conquests, there was no new wealth coming in. The government tried to solve this problem by making more coins. But here's the trick. They used less and less gold and silver in each coin. A coin that used to be 90% silver might now be only 50% silver, or even 10%. They mixed in cheap metals like copper or tin. What happened? This caused inflation. Inflation means that prices go up and money becomes worth less and less. A loaf of bread that once cost 1 coin now cost 10 coins, then 20 coins. A farmer who sold his wheat for 100 coins found that those coins couldn't buy as much as they used to. People became poorer, even though they had the same amount of money. Soldiers were especially unhappy because their wages stayed the same, but everything cost more. A Roman soldier in the year 200 AD could live comfortably on his salary. A soldier in 300 AD struggled to buy food. This made the army weaker and less loyal. The third problem was corruption. When the central government became weak, local officials became dishonest. They took bribes. They stole money from the treasury. They made deals with criminals. Tax collectors were especially corrupt. They would demand more money than the law required and keep the extra for themselves. They would threaten people, take their property, and ruin families. The rich found ways to avoid paying taxes. They bribed officials or used legal loopholes. So the burden fell more and more on the poor and the middle class. When people lose trust in their government, society begins to fall apart. People stop cooperating. They stop following laws. They stop believing in the system. That's what was happening in Rome. The glue that held society together was dissolving. All roads lead to Rome, and it's almost true. You can travel from Rome to nearly any part of the empire on these excellent roads. The empire is rich, very rich. Merchants bring goods from all over the known world: silk from China, spices from India, gold from Africa, wine from Greece, olive oil from Spain. The markets are full of life. You can hear people speaking Latin, the language of Rome, but also Greek, Egyptian, and many other languages. Roman law keeps order in the cities. The Romans create a system of laws that is fair and organized. Many modern legal systems are based on Roman law. They have courts, judges, and lawyers. If someone commits a crime, they get a trial. This is quite advanced for ancient times. The Roman army is the most powerful military force in the world. Roman legions are disciplined, well-trained, and equipped with the best weapons. Each legion has about 5,000 soldiers. They march in formation, follow orders perfectly, and conquer enemy after enemy. But here's something important to understand. This great empire didn't fall in one day. It didn't even fall in 1 year or 1 decade. It took hundreds of years. The story of Rome's fall is like watching a mighty oak tree slowly dying. At first, you see just a few brown leaves on one branch. You don't worry too much. Then more branches start to die. The trunk develops cracks. Birds stop nesting in it. And finally, after years of decline, a strong wind comes, and the whole tree falls down with a tremendous crash. So what went wrong? How did such a powerful, wealthy, and advanced empire disappear? Let's find out. The problems begin. The problems started In the 3rd century, that's around the year 100 to 300 AD. By this time, Rome had been powerful for hundreds of years, but cracks were starting to show. First, there was a serious leadership problem. Remember, Rome was ruled by emperors. These were men with absolute power. A good emperor could make the empire prosperous and peaceful. A bad emperor could cause disaster. After the great emperors of the past died, men like Augustus, Trajan, and Marcus Aurelius, the new emperors were often weak, cruel, or simply incompetent. Some emperors cared more about luxury and parties than about ruling well. They spent money on themselves while the empire suffered. Even worse, the Roman army began to choose emperors. Here's how it worked. Soldiers would kill an emperor they didn't like and put their favorite general on the throne. Then another group of soldiers in a different part of the empire would kill that emperor and choose someone else. Sometimes there were 2 or 3 men claiming to be emperor at the same time, fighting civil wars against each other. In just 50 years, Rome had more than 20 different emperors. Many of them ruled for only a few months before they were murdered. One emperor ruled for just 3 months. Another ruled for only 6 weeks. Can you imagine trying to run a country like this? Some people blamed Christianity. They said that Rome fell because people had abandoned the old Roman gods Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and started worshipping a new god, the Christian God. Others said Rome fell because of moral decline, or corruption, or bad luck. Everyone had a theory, but no one had a solution. The division of the empire. Now I need to tell you about an important decision that made things even worse. This decision was meant to help the empire, but it actually weakened it. The Roman Empire was huge, absolutely massive. At its peak, it covered about 5 million square kilometers. That's bigger than the entire country of India. Governing such a large territory from one city was incredibly difficult. Think about it. If you're sitting in Rome, how do you control what's happening in Britain, 2,000 kilometers away? How do you respond to an invasion in Syria? How do you collect taxes in Spain? Communication was slow. Messages traveled by horse or ship, which took weeks or even months. A letter from Rome to Britain might take 30 days to arrive. By the time you heard about a problem and sent help, it might be too late. So in the year 285 AD, the Roman Emperor Diocletian made a bold decision. He divided the empire into 2 parts, the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. Each part would have its own emperor, its own army, and its own administration. The Western Empire included Italy, Spain, France, Britain, and parts of North Africa. Its capital was Rome, and later it moved to Ravenna, a city on the east coast of Italy that was easier to defend. The Eastern Empire included Greece, Egypt, Turkey, Syria, and the lands around the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Its capital was Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul in Turkey. This was a beautiful city built on the Bosphorus Strait, where Europe meets Asia. The idea was that 2 emperors could govern better than one. Each emperor could focus on his own region, respond quickly to problems, and keep the empire running smoothly. It sounds like a good plan, right? But in reality, this division made the empire weaker. Why? Because the two halves sometimes competed with each other instead of cooperating. They had different priorities. They argued over resources. Sometimes they even fought against each other. The two halves were very different in character. The Eastern Empire was richer. It had more trade because it controlled important trade routes between Europe and Asia. It had more cities, great cities like Alexandria in Egypt, Antioch in Syria, and Constantinople itself. These cities were centers of culture, learning, and commerce. The Eastern Empire also had better defenses. Constantinople was an incredibly strong city. It was built on a peninsula, protected by water on 3 sides. The city had massive walls, some of the strongest fortifications in the world. It was very difficult to attack. An enemy would need a huge army and a powerful navy to even have a chance of capturing it. The Western Empire, on the other hand, was poorer and more vulnerable. It had fewer wealthy cities. Its borders were longer and harder to defend. It faced more barbarian invasions because the Germanic tribes were all pushing from the north and west, and it couldn't get enough help from the Eastern Empire because the East wanted to protect its own territories first. Over time, the gap between East and West grew larger. They started to feel like two separate countries. The West spoke Latin, the East spoke Greek. They had different cultures, different churches. The Christian church in the West was led by the Pope in Rome, while the church in the East was led by the Patriarch in Constantinople. They even had different styles of art and architecture. The Eastern Empire would survive for another 1,000 years. It would continue as the Byzantine Empire, keeping alive Roman law, culture, and traditions. It would face many challenges, invasions, plagues, wars, but it would endure until 1453 AD, when Constantinople finally fell to the Ottoman Turks. But the Western Empire? It was dying, and there was little that anyone could do to save it. If you're enjoying this English learning journey through history, please consider subscribing to David's English podcast. We post new content regularly to help you improve your English naturally and enjoyably. The final collapse. Let's move to the final chapter of our story. By the year 450 AD, the Western Roman Empire was falling apart piece by piece. Barbarian tribes had not just invaded, they had settled inside the empire. They controlled entire provinces. The Vandals, led by their king Genseric, controlled North Africa, including the important city of Carthage. This was a disaster for Rome, because North Africa provided most of the grain that fed Italy. Without that grain, people in Rome were starving. The Visigoths controlled Spain and southern France. The Franks were settling in northern France eventually. France would be named after them. The Burgundians controlled eastern France. The Angles and Saxons were invading Britain. Everywhere you looked, barbarian tribes were taking over. Roman authority existed only in Italy, and even there it was weak. The city of Rome itself was a shadow of its former glory. The population had shrunk from over 1,000,000 people to perhaps 100,000. Many buildings were abandoned. The aqueducts weren't maintained, so parts of the city had no water. The streets were dirty. Crime was common. The great markets were nearly empty. The emperors in the West had become powerless. They were like puppets on strings. controlled by barbarian generals who held the real power. These generals commanded the armies, made the decisions, and chose who would be emperor. If an emperor didn't obey them, he would be removed and replaced with someone more cooperative. One of these powerful generals was a man named Ricimer. He was half barbarian himself. For 16 years, he controlled the Western Empire. By the year 476 AD, the situation was hopeless. The last Roman emperor in the West was a boy named Romulus Augustulus. His name is interesting. Romulus was the legendary founder of Rome, and Augustus was the title of the first emperor. So his name represented the beginning and the glory of Rome. But he was just a teenager, put on the throne by his father, who was a Roman general. Then a barbarian general named Odoacer decided that the empire was finished. He led his soldiers into Italy, defeated the emperor's father, and marched into Ravenna, where the young emperor was living. Odoacer didn't kill the boy. Instead, he sent him into retirement with a pension. He was actually quite merciful. Then Odoacer did something symbolic. He took the emperor's crown and royal robes and sent them to Constantinople. To the Eastern Emperor, he sent a message saying, "We don't need a Western Emperor anymore. You are the only emperor now. I will rule Italy as your servant." Of course, this was just politics. Odoacer ruled Italy as he pleased and didn't really obey Constantinople. This is the date historians mark as the fall of the Western Roman Empire. September 4th for 76 AD, after over 1,000 years of existence. The Western Roman Empire was no more. But here's an interesting thing to understand. For many people living at that time, life didn't change dramatically overnight. The fall of Rome wasn't like a Hollywood movie with explosions, dramatic battles, and buildings burning. It was more like a slow fade to darkness. Life just got gradually worse, year after year, decade after decade, until one day people realized that the Rome they had known was gone. Cities continued to exist. People still farmed their land. Craftsmen still made goods. Merchants still traded, though less than before. The Latin language didn't disappear, it evolved into new languages: Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian. These are called Romance languages because they come from Roman Latin. The Christian Church survived and became even more powerful. In fact, when the emperors were gone, the Church filled the power vacuum. The Pope in Rome became not just a religious leader, but also a political leader. The Church preserved much of Roman culture and knowledge. Through the dark ages that followed, monks and monasteries copied ancient Roman books, keeping the knowledge alive for future generations. In many ways, Rome never really died. Its influence continues to this day. Our alphabet comes from Latin. Many English words come from Latin. Our legal systems are based on Roman law. Our architecture is influenced by Roman buildings. Even the idea of a republic government where citizens have rights comes from Rome. Why did it happen? So let's step back and think about the big question: why did Rome fall? Historians have debated this question for over 1,500 years. Some historians add other factors. Diseases like the Antonine Plague that killed millions of people. Climate change that affected farming and made some areas colder and wetter. Moral decline, where Roman values of duty and honor were forgotten, and the rise of Christianity, which changed Roman culture and values. Different historians emphasize different causes. Some say economics was most important. Others say barbarian invasions. Still others say political instability or moral decline. The truth is that Rome fell because of a perfect storm, many problems happening at the same time, each one making the others worse, creating a downward spiral that became impossible to stop. Could Rome have been saved? Maybe, if they had reformed the economy earlier, if they had better emperors, if they had stopped the civil wars, if they had found a better way to deal with the barbarians. Perhaps the story would have been different, but they didn't. And so the greatest empire of the ancient world came to an end. And that's our story for today. The fall of the Roman Empire. What can we learn from this? Perhaps that nothing lasts forever. Even the greatest powers rise and fall. Rome seemed invincible, eternal, unstoppable, but it wasn't. Success requires not just strength, but wisdom, good leadership, adaptability, and the ability to solve problems before they become too big. The fall of Rome also teaches us that societies are fragile. They depend on trust, cooperation, and good governance. When these things break down, when leaders become corrupt, when people lose faith in institutions, when internal divisions grow too deep, even the mightiest civilization can collapse. The Roman Empire ended more than 1,500 years ago, but we still study it today because it teaches us so much about history, politics, economics, and human nature. It shows us how great things can be built, but also how they can be destroyed. I hope you enjoyed learning English with this fascinating story. Remember, the best way to improve your English is to keep listening, keep learning, and keep practicing. Stories like this help you learn vocabulary, understand sentence structure, and practice listening all at the same time. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to David's English podcast. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode. And if you have suggestions for future stories or topics you'd like me to cover, leave them in the comments below. I read all your comments, and I love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this English learning community. Your support helps this channel grow and allows me to create more content to help you on your English learning journey. Until next time, keep learning and keep improving your English. Goodbye. David's English Podcast. Like, comment, share,